All right, this is Tonya Crombie. I am talking about managing anxiety in the classroom and a different way to look at anxiety in the classroom and outside of the classroom even. And I'm going to share my screen and we are going to get started. There we go. I've got to move all the chat window and the view windows around, but yes, let's look at a different way to think about anxiety. So if you are in education, you are seeing things like this: anxiety, anxiety, anxiety. School psychologists expect to see a surge of kids. Kids are anxious about going to school. But if you are thinking that this is something new, this is a article from 2018, before COVID, before any of this. We already had an epidemic of anxiety in the United States. And I would imagine that many of you who are not in the United States are seeing similar things out there. In fact, we just heard from someone in Italy where there's just a lot of pressure on kids to test well, to have good grades, to have extracurriculars, to do this, to do that, to play sports, to be a leader. And the pressure does catch up with our kids. So right now, we often think about anxiety. We think about like things in the classroom. We think it's ADHD, it's autism spectrum disorders. We hear a lot of talk about those things, but the most common mental health disorder among children today is actually anxiety. It is the most common, and what depending on the source, different research will say we can expect between 15 to 30% of children to be able to meet the criteria for a full anxiety disorder. That's not just suffering from anxiety, but actually meeting the clinical criteria to be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder by the time they are 18. So at the high end, we're talking about a third of kids meeting the qualifications to be diagnosed with a full-blown anxiety disorder. So that to me is a very sobering statistic of what we are facing as parents, as teachers, as people who care about kids. This is a very sobering statistic. And when we ask kids, when we ask teenagers, what do they think is the most common thing they see among themselves? You can see anxiety and depression is the top of the list, and the 70% bar right there is 70% of kids say it's a major problem amongst each other. So it's really a significant thing that we're seeing out there in the world. And what I want you to take away from those statistics is, you know, being a good teacher of any kind is hard, but anxiety makes it 1,000 times harder. So let's talk for just a second. For some of you, this may be things that you already know, but it's always good to ground ourselves in what exactly we're talking about. And obviously what we're talking about is our brain and the way our brains work. So basically, the easiest way to explain anxiety is that we have two different operating systems going on at the same time. We have two brains almost inside of us. So we have a very primitive brain, the back of our brain, the brain stem, we call it the limbic system. It's a much more primitive part of our brain that was designed for the sole purpose of keeping us alive. And the way that it does that, again, it's primitive, it's simple, but it has kept our species going for thousands of years. Basically, what it does is when we sense that we are in danger, it sends a signal to our entire body. It's very efficient, talks to every part of us, the way our heart is beating, the way our pupils are dilated, the way our food is digesting. It It communicates to our entire body and says, you are in danger, prepare to do one of three things. Gives us three simple options so that we don't have to kind of plan and strategize and use all this sophisticated parts of our brains that's up here in the front. We're just using a very simple part that says, you got three options. You're in danger, you need to run away, you need to freeze and hide in place, or you need to fight whatever it is that is coming after you. So fight, flight, or freeze. We've heard that analogy, that little acronym, fight, flight, or freeze. And that is basically what anxiety is. And when we were in a situation where we were often in danger, we were out in a jungle somewhere, or we were living, very hand to mouth, that was a real thing. It was something that we really needed. We needed that. Nowadays, we aren't often in situations where we literally need to fight, run away, or freeze in place. We aren't about to be attacked by a tiger. We aren't about to, have to fight a Viking who is, coming onto our shores to take over our lands. However, our brains don't know that. Our brains react to perceived danger by going into that part of our brain. And as I said, our whole body, it's a whole body reaction, anxiety, that says, I'm in danger. I need to do something. So when we think about what does that look like in a classroom setting, well, fight, flight, or freeze is a great way to break down what you might see from a student who is actually struggling with anxiety. A lot of times we think anxiety is like a timid little person or even a teenager who's biting their fingernails and they're very shy, and that can be it. But there are a lot of other ways that we see anxiety show up, and fight, flight, or freeze helps us notice those. So fight is things like anger. It is the kid who has an outburst. It could be tantrums in the younger children. It can be when we say flight, running away. It can be literal. They can run away. They can stomp out of a room. They can slam doors. That's some of their flight. But also, kids have learned ways, as have we, adults have too, but we all have ways that we run away without actually running away. We escape. We zone out. We stare out the windows. We use these are our favorite little tools to escape. We have a smartphone in our hand all the time, and you can see the kids doing it. It's not about paying attention to what they're even reading. It's just, I'm trying to not feel all the things I'm feeling right now. So I'm going to try and escape into this little device. Sometimes they go to sleep. And I know that's hard because I teach too, and I have students who fall asleep in class. And sometimes we feel like they're being disrespectful, but we have to remember a couple things. One, they really are tired. Our kids don't get enough sleep. Two, sometimes they are trying to escape their feeling of anxiety. And sometimes they have been anxious so long that they are exhausted just from the anxiety. And that also can make them fall asleep. So fighting, flighting, freezing is also can be literal, or we can have ways that we freeze that isn't a literal freeze. So the literal freeze is like, I can't move. I'm just stuck in place. And sometimes you see that. You see kids who just, they are so overwhelmed they can't move, especially our little ones. We see that. But with the older kids, when they've kind of figured out how to manage it, they still freeze internally. There's an internal, it's like a frozen brain where they are completely indecisive. They can't process the information that they're taking in. So they may ask the same question. They may ask what you just said. And this happens in classrooms all the time. The educator, the teacher says, do this, write this here. And the student raises their hand and says, what did you just say? Where do I write my name? And a lot of times, again, that's not a sign of being disrespectful. It's not a sign of a child who isn't trying to listen. It is a sign of a child who may be struggling with a lot of overwhelming anxiety and they just can't process what you're saying. They could ask the same question over and over. They could have a hard time. You feel like you've said it 5 times and they still haven't gotten it. So fight, flight, or freeze helps us think of, it's not just the obvious anxiety. It's a lot of other things that we may have labeled as other things that could be anxiety. Anxiety often looks like attention deficit. Kids who can't sit still in their seat, that could be a hyperactive child. That could be a very anxious child. Few more red flags. These are things you guys know if you're in the classroom, and you have probably seen rituals. That's a warning signal with a child who you notice is doing things to alleviate anxiety. So before a test, they have to go sharpen their pencil. They have to turn around their seat. They have to sit a certain way. These sorts of rituals are a signal that this is a child who's struggling with anxiety and is coming up with some rituals to help them manage it. Anytime we see changes, we always, as educators, need to pay attention. Academic performance suddenly changes, attendance changes. Kids who suddenly start coming in late are asked to check out or asked to go see the nurse. Sometimes what they call things like headaches and stomach aches are often anxiety. Suddenly becoming withdrawn or shy, it's also a red flag. And kids who can't pay attention in class, yes, sometimes that's an attention issue. Sometimes it's an anxious child. So when we are in this part of our brain, the limbic part of our brain, and we're feeling anxious, what's going on with the rest of our brain? Well, it's not functioning properly. It's not fully online. And that's the part of our brain that we use to learn. So it's a real issue. Anxiety in the classroom is going to keep kids from learning as well as they could if they weren't feeling anxious. So it is a vicious cycle. Anxiety is going to impact the way our kids are behaving in class and at home. It impacts their ability to participate, both like verbally answering questions, but also just mentally participating in what is being taught, what is being shared. It's going to impact their ability to perform the things you're asking them to do, because sometimes when they get home, they don't remember if they were feeling anxious when you explained what they were supposed to do, which obviously impacts their learning, which then impacts how they behave in school. So it's a very vicious cycle that anxiety can create. And anxiety can be contagious. If we think about it like energy, I was just in the a session right before this where she was talking about positive psychology. And there's a lot of great research in positive psychology about how negative emotions are, she said, negative emotions scream, positive emotions whisper. And anxiety is just a really strong negative emotion, and it screams. So it impacts not just the kids, which it does. I often joke and say kids are like horses. If you spook one of them, the whole barn is going to start kind of going crazy. And that is true. But anxiety, we can catch it. The adults pick up on the anxiety and we feel it. And we don't always realize that we are picking up this anxiety and actually feeling it and responding from an anxious place. So here's the thing I always want to say, because it's so, so important that we hear everything I've just explained, but hear this as well. Anxiety is terrible. It disrupts lives. And anxiety is a normal part of being a human. It is the way we're designed to work. So it's very important that we always remind ourselves of that, because it feels terrible. And what we do when we feel terrible, we're feeling anxious, we're feeling bad, and then we make it worse by saying something is wrong with me. And students do this. Your students do this. When they feel anxious, they are saying something is wrong with me. And it's really important that we are able to share, nothing is wrong with you. You are working exactly the way you were designed to work. It feels terrible. It is miserable. And it is exactly, your brain is working the way it was designed to work. So it's terrible and it's normal. So before I jump into some tips, I do want to share a little bit about why I even talk about this. I have a doctorate in industrial organizational psychology. I am a certified life coach. I have taught positive psychology and some of those concepts in college and in the high school level. But the reason that I talk about anxiety is because of these two perfect little people here that are mine. And until I was a mom, I don't know that I really appreciated what it's like for teenagers today, for our teenagers and the level of stress that they are experiencing. So my children have both struggled with anxiety. And as I just said on the last slide, it's really important. I do not say there's something wrong with my kids. I say my kids are perfect. They're exactly who they're supposed to be. And they have struggled with anxiety like at least, a third of their peers, or maybe more. I always say the statistics say 30% will have some anxiety disorder. 100% of human beings are going to experience anxiety at some point. We all feel anxiety at some point. It's how we're designed. So going back to our original topic, if educating is relating, if we are trying to really educate through a deeper level of connection with the people, the students in front of us, how can we relate to anxiety? So the first tip I want to give you guys is that thing that I just said earlier is we have to befriend our anxiety. And the first way that we do that is just to remind ourselves and our students over and over again, it is normal to feel this way. This is the way your brain was designed to work. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It's just the way we're designed to work. Are there some people who are going to experience more anxiety or experience more easily or experience it more often? Yes, absolutely. I would say it is no different than any other thing on the spectrum of being a human. Some of us need glasses to see. Some of us see better than others. That is anxiety is exactly the same. Some of us have asthma. I have asthma. Means that I don't breathe as well as everyone else. Does it mean I'm broken and flawed and cannot have a happy life? Of course not. But I do have a tendency to have some issues with my breathing at times. And anxiety is the same thing. Some of us have a tendency to feel it more often than others. And that's an important way to explain it to students and kids, that this is something that everybody experiences. Some of us experience it more than others. And the second way that I recommend we really use this focus that we're talking about today and the next 2 days about relating is by shifting our focus on how we look at our children, look at the students in front of us. So when our students are struggling, and when our children, I'll say this as a parent, when our parents are struggling, we lose sight of the things that make them awesome. And this is very true of, again, why do I do this work? Why do I talk about this? As a parent, I really came to this point where it was all about the anxiety and how do we manage this? How do we make it better? How do we fix it? And in the process of getting so focused on how to fix a problem, I totally lost sight of all the good things that were still happening. And this is really, really important in the classroom, at home. Most of my work, actually, just so you guys know, is with parents. I do an entire semester's worth of work coaching parents who are struggling to parent their children who are struggling with anxiety. And the reason that I coach parents is because parents have such a huge impact on their children. You know, as much as we want to just get a psychologist or a psychiatrist to fix our kids, really as parents, we have more impact. And that, you know, who has the second amount of impact after parents? Teachers. Teachers are with kids so often every day. And when teachers are able to do these things, to focus on the things that make the students awesome, it has a huge impact on the way students see themselves, whether they're struggling with anxiety, attention issues, learning disabilities, anything. But just like I said with anxiety, our brains often keep us from doing this. So when I say like we lose sight of what's awesome about kids, it's not because we're bad people. It's not because we are, you know, mean. It's because our brains are designed to see what's wrong. And we are also designed to label things and put things into buckets. It just is an efficient way for our brains to work. So we are always going to notice the behavior issues. We're always going to notice the problems. That is our natural negativity bias. And we're going to say, this kid has a problem, this kid is fine. 2 buckets, as opposed to, you know, every kid is unique. That's just a lot of work for our brains. So our brains don't like seeing it that way. We're also designed to see what we look for. So if we're looking, if once a child demonstrates some anxiety or some issues with anxiety, and we start looking for ways that children are anxious or disruptive or inattentive or whatever it is we're looking for, we will always find it. So my premise is, if we change what we're looking for, we will change what we're seeing. So I have this belief that anxiety, these children who tend to really struggle with anxiety, it's often a side effect of what makes them awesome. It's often these kids that have something really amazing that makes them also a little more prone to anxiety. And I can give lots of examples from my clients over the years. I have adult clients and teenage clients. And I've seen things like, one of my adult clients is a police officer. And what makes him an amazing police officer is his ability to read and feel the emotions of other people. He can really notice, he can read a room, he just picks up on every little subtle signal. He reads people extremely well. That also makes him more prone to anxiety. People who have a lot of empathy, a lot of compassion, also tend to be a little more prone to anxiety. Our artists, our musicians, our comedians, comedians, really funny kids often struggle with anxiety. Kids who, I'm trying to think of some of my other clients that I've had recently, just a lot of them I would put in the bucket of just being super compassionate kids. They really do care deeply about other people, and that also makes them feel a little more anxious. So instead of focusing on ways that our students aren't performing, we can shift our focus to focusing on the things that they are doing well. And we not only shift our focus to say, you're great at this, you have so much empathy, you have so much compassion, you're so wonderful at this. When we do this well, we help them start seeing the things that are great about them. We help them start using the things that are great about them to help manage their anxiety. And I know that sounds kind of tricky, but it really does work. One of the most simple ways that it works is just by acknowledging this strength, by pointing out the strength, by helping the kids see the strength. It is also teaching our children, this is how you work. That's a phrase I use all the time as a parent, and a phrase I recommend using with your students. This is just how you work. You are someone who feels things, you feel big feelings, and you're feeling big feelings is a great gift. It makes you a good actress. It makes you great when you do presentations. It makes you, you'll be a great doctor someday. Whatever it is that you know about the child, you can say that is a strength. And sometimes because of that strength, you know, every gift comes with a price. And the price of this gift is that you will feel some feelings you don't want to feel sometimes. That's the price of this gift. Um, Maybe your gift is vigilance. You are just someone who is very aware of your surroundings. It's a wonderful gift, and you can use that gift. That is what I would say about the police officer. He has a gift of being very aware of his surroundings, that when he is at his best, he can keep people safe. This is a gift that helps people stay safe. It's when our gift becomes our weakness. Our strengths can become our weakness when we overuse them. So how do we do this in a very, very practical sense in a classroom setting when we have a student who is struggling? So what I recommend and what I try to do myself as a parent and as an educator is to use what I know about the brain and to use some brain hacks. Because one of the best ways, I tell this to my students all the time, the best way to help someone who is struggling with anxiety, first and foremost, is to manage your own anxiety. Before you can help someone else, you have to put that oxygen mask on yourself. So the best way you can ever help someone else who is struggling with anxiety is just to manage your own anxiety. So shift to your own wise, calm brain. So like I said, anxiety is contagious. When a student is feeling anxious, it will make you not be as calm and centered and see as many possibilities and all the things I said that they can't do when they're feeling anxious. It starts to affect us. So simply noticing, I'm starting to feel an uncomfortable feeling. And for each of us, anxiety and the feelings that anxiety might make us feel or might be slightly different. For me, it is a chest and stomach kind of a thing that I literally can feel it in my body, an anxious feeling. And when I notice that, what the first thing I do is notice it, is acknowledge, is say, oh, I'm feeling that thing right now. This is starting to make me feel, so I need to take a few breaths. We always have our breath. I know it's cliche. I know people say it over and over again. And the reason people say it over and over again is because it really does work. There is biology to explain why it works. In fact, I like to tell students why it works, because when we explain it to them, they're more likely to do it. And what I will tell students is, just like your brain is able to communicate to your body when you feel anxious, it's a super fast, efficient system that changes your entire body. There is an amazing feedback mechanism that goes from your lungs to your brain. Because one of the quickest ways, so remember what I said, anxiety is just a thing to keep us alive. It's an ancient system that is designed to keep us alive. And one of the quickest ways for a human being to stop being alive is to not have oxygen. So when we are deprived of oxygen, our brain really, really panics. And when we are anxious, we start to breathe quick, shallow breaths. We aren't getting as much oxygen, which kind of gives a feedback loop. You feel a little anxious, you get a little less oxygen, it makes you a little more anxious. However, when we get lots of oxygen, when we take long, slow, deep breaths, we send a message back up to that brain that says, it's okay. You're getting lots of oxygen. We're safe. You're going to be okay. So it's a feedback mechanism that talks back to the anxious brain. So that's why it works. That's why I personally do it when I feel anxious. And it's really important to explain that to if your kids are old enough, or even little kids can understand that, because a lot of them are too cool for school. They know better. Oh, that breathing thing doesn't work. But when they understand why, that it really is a physiological thing, they actually might try it. They also will try it if they see you do it and see that it works. So sometimes it's not what we say, it's what we do. So we're modeling how to do this. And then the last piece that I do for my own, I'm shifting because everyone else around me is anxious, is I just really do whatever I need to do, whatever small thing you can do to bring yourself back to the present moment. Because anxiety is always about things that might happen in the future, things that have happened in the past, things that could happen, but it isn't usually what's happening right this minute. And so when I can shift into just feeling my feet on the ground, wiggling my toes, feeling the weight of my body in the seat, rubbing my fingers together and just attending to that feeling, rubbing my palms, whatever I can do that I can just totally focus on this moment and shift out of the swirling thoughts that might be making me feel anxious, that allows me then to respond to the anxious student in front of me in a totally different way. If there's a student who is anxious or a student who is behaving in a way that is causing me not to see, like I said before, I want to see what's awesome about this student. And if I see that I am not able to do that, I'm going to use some of those techniques. And I actually envision a switch in my mind. This comes from a really good book called The Strength Switch that I recommend. But use a visual in my mind of flipping a switch. I'm in one mode, I'm going to flip to another mode, and I'm going to ask myself, what am I missing here? What strength am I not seeing? And sometimes I just can have to use a mantra. I know the strength is here, but I'm just not seeing it right now. What strength am I missing? I know it's here, I'm just not seeing it. And by grounding myself in that, it does help me remember, oh, that kid who's disrupting my lecture by telling a joke and making the entire class laugh, their strength is in being funny and entertaining, and that's how they are connecting with other people. They're maybe misusing it at this very moment, but instead of kind of going into a negative spiral myself, which causes me to react and not relate, focusing on the strength helps me to redirect that behavior in a way that it continues to help that child see what's great about them. And that is the strength of what I consider relating. Even sometimes the kid who, like I said, cracking a joke in class and trying to be funny, that is an anxiety management tool for kids, is making a joke when they feel really uncomfortable. So we know that strengths tend to be innate, but they can be developed. And by us as educators helping our kids see them and giving them opportunities to practice them, we are the best people that are equipped to develop strengths. We're better equipped as educators than probably anyone else out there to help kids develop their strengths, to see them, and to then the focus is on what's great about me, not what's wrong with me. And that's a huge shift in the way kids will get through their educational life. But this tip is, I put this in here because it's like, it's a 2-for-1. It's not just the benefit of helping kids see it. We also help shift their mindset when we focus on strengths and help them develop them and point them out and say, go, if you're so funny, I want you to help write the script for our skit that we're going to do on Parents' Night, or whatever. We give them opportunities and help them develop it. We are changing their mindset from, I am who I am. I'm an anxious person. And that's a thing I hear kids say, I'm anxious. And I always correct that because words are important. You are not anxious. You may feel anxious, but you are. And start listing all the things that they are. You're creative. You are funny. You are, just you're you, and that's good enough. That's an important thing for them to hear, but you're not anxious. Anxious is a feeling. So we are shifting their mindset from I am this bad thing to I am a lot of things and I can develop and I can change. And when we help them see that, have that growth mindset, they do better academically. They are better with failures. They're willing to take on challenges because they know a failure does not define who they are. That's a really important thing about the growth mindset. Failing is just a stop on the road to success, as opposed to it means I'm a failure. They come up with better strategies to improve because they believe they can improve. If you don't think it's possible, you don't even spend the time coming up with a strategy. They're more creative. They're more successful socially, because what happens when we believe we can change? We believe other people can change too. We don't label other people as that kid's mean. It might just be that kid responded badly in that situation, but they can change. So imagine what would happen if kids started to see anxiety is just normal. It's just something that happens. Imagine what would happen if they could see that it was a side effect of something that was really awesome about them. And imagine what might happen if in schools, we started focusing on building our kids' strengths instead of focusing on flaws and trying to fix them. So with that, I would love to hear your reactions, your responses, your questions, anything that you guys are thinking. Feel free to put them in the chat or just to unmute yourself. Even if it's, yes.
Yeah. I think for me the thing that strikes a chord is this notion of being labeled as a kid. And it sort of carries through. It carries through your education system, and then it becomes the label you live into. It becomes your narrative. It becomes who you are in the world. And as opposed to, no, did that label actually belong here? Or could I just have looked at it in a different way? So I think that's really important. And looking at the sort of model of coaching, or even of education, it is to rectify problems as opposed to what would make you even better. It's not about that. So I like your flipping over of the possibility. So thank you.
Yeah. And I even talk to, like, again, I'm a parent of children who are going through the education system, and I'm educating at the same time. And some of what they complain about, I completely agree with. When they come home and say, they're forcing me to learn things that I don't need. And I'm thinking, you're right. You're right. It's rectifying a weakness that doesn't really even need to be rectified. The fact that you don't know how to do trigonometry is probably going to be okay in life. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I wanted to come back or still what I said at the beginning. The entire presentation resonates with me, and with like this all this time when parents come to me and say, "Oh, if you find," as I said, I'm an educational consultant, so if you find a better school for my kids, then it will be improving maths and science, let's say, and then it will do medicine. Or maybe the student doesn't want to do medicine, and it's fine, But so the kind of expectation that makes the student feeling broken, as you said, and then it creates anxiety, which is additional additional things to be fixed. And then, as Marley said, it's just a label that you carry with you over your entire life. And I can say it by experience. I mean, every one of us experienced that, I think, I'm afraid. because first is teacher that starts saying math is not for you, and then there's parents saying, oh, how can I do with my kids that doesn't know how to study math? And then, and it goes all the way. So thanks a lot. I mean, there was also lots of insights that I was not aware of, and thanks for suggesting the books, a couple of books. I will surely look for them. Thank you. It was really interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree. I think the growth mindset for our kids is helpful, because that is another issue with the label, and I was that kid. I was the kid who decided very early, I'm not good at math. It is just a thing. It's not something I can improve on. I just am not. And to have the idea that it doesn't come as easily to me as it does as others, but I am capable of getting better. Maybe I'll never go be a mathematician, and that's okay. But having a growth mindset from an early age is super important with our kids. We've got to find the balance between not dwelling on what their weakness is, which we tend to do, and also not letting them, kind of come to an idea that my weakness is defined and there's no way to change it.
Sorry, I'll jump in here again. But yeah, I mean, I sort of remember growing my kids up. If one does that as a parent, I think they teach us instead of the other way around.
Yeah.
But in that process is the focus was always on what they weren't good at, and yet if you focused on the strengths and they really excelled at that, and you did just enough to get them through the subjects that maybe weren't their greatest, passion, then they would excel. And
Yeah.
so, and I think that I don't know how we shift education into that space of focusing on what they're really good at, because when they do that, that is like the path. It's a natural inclination at school that they then.
Exactly. And it's not easy to do in today's world. I'll say, as a parent of teenagers, there is constantly that chatter of, they're not going to be successful. Oh my gosh, what is this going to lead to? And I totally have those kids. I have my child right now is studying to be he's studying music production and technology, which is like, both my husband and I were like, we don't even know what that means, and we just are hoping for the best, but it's what he loves. So we're trying to live into what I preach by letting him do what he has always been interested in. And we'll see, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And yes, someone just said love and patience is required to fight against anxiety. That's right. Anxiety is, just that example I just used, anxiety is the killer of allowing our children to be who they need to be, because there's that fear that what if maybe I should have made him become really good at math. What if I didn't? I should have practiced their times tables more. I should have made him do worksheets in the summer. The anxiety is what's driving a lot of that behavior of focusing on their weaknesses.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you for your presentation. And I totally agree that anxiety is terrible, but it's normal. And I think shifting focus is a good method to remove anxiety. And so I think parents and children should focus more on what they are good at, not the
Yes, I completely agree, Anna, that it is it's a problem, and it's a problem for all of us. It's a problem for the kids and the parents. And as a coach, what I know is the only person I really have any control over is myself. So that's really where I try and put my energy, is to manage my anxiety, manage my expectations, and by doing that, I do two things. One, I'm a better parent, I'm a better teacher because I'm less anxious and I'm more focused, but I also am modeling what I want them to do. And they need to see us like you said, it's normal. So it's okay for us to say, I'm feeling anxious. And so I need to do something to calm myself down. That makes it more normal. Like, oh, everybody feels this way.
Yeah.
I see someone. I'm sorry, Anna, go ahead.
Do you think like social networks and like, I mean, all these wonderful tools that students have now, everyone has, but I'm afraid they are like pushing on anxiety in a way, because I mean, you always see success of people and wonderful things and wonderful experiences, and they make teenagers thinking, oh, I'm bad because I feel anxious, I feel I'm not successful, I feel, how do you address this with parents and students you support?
Well, yes, it absolutely does. I think it's just really important, just like we were talking about normalizing anxiety, we have to normalize what those are being used for. It's just like, in a way, those of us who are older, we grew up with fashion magazines, and they said the same thing about fashion magazines. We are growing up with these ideals of bodies and beauty that are unrealistic and we can't attain. And that was true. I mean, they were Photoshopped. They're all the things. And so it was the job of the older generation, the parents, everyone to say, that's not real. That's just not real. And I think, again, that's what we do with the social media, is to remind them, like, this is a fun place to post a picture from your birthday party, and it's fun to share some pictures from your vacation, and it's fun to see what other people are doing and like and give encouragement to other people. But remember, nobody posts pictures of them having an anxiety attack. No one. No one is ever going to post. And that's how, I mean, as a parent, I felt that way. I wrote 2 books about anxiety in children. And when I wrote these books, people came out of the woodwork. People I knew, people I saw all the time, who said, me too. I follow them on social media. I see every one of their posts. They look like they have perfect lives. In fact, someone said that to me. Until you wrote your book, I thought you had a perfect life. I don't post pictures of my kids having panic attacks on social media, right? So we just have to kind of always remind ourselves and remind other people. This is like looking at someone's photo album. It's just going to have the pretty parts. It's not, we're not going to put the parts of ourselves that we don't want to share on social media or on a photo album or hanging on our wall. It's not everything. It's just a tiny sliver of who we are. I see Jorge has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I'm working with people at the university, but they eventually will become an educators. So they are really feeling anxiety after pandemic. Well, during pandemic and now after pandemic, and all of the things that you said. I mean, this breathe thing has been really helpful to them. It's I mean, oxygen at the brain and then see clearly what's happening and taking it from a very different place. And then they can see what's happening with them and see that not everything has to be with something that is bad at that time, because they said, I have a lot of things, a lot of to deal with in this moment, and everything is happening at the same time, and I can't handle that. So when we breathe together and we see what's the problem now, and we can like separate it, and I mean, like track once at a time. So I think that's very important for them. And also they are using that simple technique with their own kids and also with their own students. Like, I mean, some of them are already in practice, but it's, yeah, very, very important. And the other thing that you said, to focusing what are they doing well, it's also helping. I mean, to say that you are not just staying in standby, you are doing things, and a lot of those things are okay. So I resonate with that, what you said, and working with university students also work a lot. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes, that is all. Couldn't agree more. I think, yeah, teaching them to breathe and teaching them why it works, so important. And one thing I do before every one of my tests, I teach 4 university classes. These are university juniors and seniors. They're big kids. And I say, I make them close your eyes, take some deep breaths, rub your fingers together, feel the weight of your feet on them. I talk them through that. And then after they've done that, I say, there is no test, there is no grade, there is no job, there is no house, there is no boss who determines your worth as a human being. Because I want them to first get calm in their brain so they can hear that message. And then I always say, this test is just a test. Do your best, but at the end of the day, it's just a test. Because they'll get, worked up. And by just taking their brain out of anxiety a little bit before every single test, I hope it helps them calm down a little bit and see things, and remind themselves when they feel anxious. The other little tip that I like to say to people all the time when you're doing the breathing is to repeat to yourself, especially because what you said about people say, I'm overwhelmed, I have so many things, I have all this stuff. And I say, right here, right now, you're okay. Right here, right now, you're safe. And we forget that because we're swirling. And once we kind of get grounded, we remember, you're right now, no, there's not a tiger at the door. There's not something bad about to happen, right? I'm going to stop the recording so we don't go into the main room with the recording going.